Hi everyone, this is me, Sara Fancy from Ranchita Live. I want to tell you about Tabletop Constellations, which is the work that I do. I do it online, I do it in person. So let me tell you about Tabletop Constellations. Come from the work of family constellations, which comes from Bert Hellinger. And it has the same principles. So the way that constellations look like is that you have someone that you're working with, they have an intention. You know, they want to change something, they want to heal something, whatever it is, or a problem. And then you bring in representatives to represent things in the person's life, such as them, like you have something to represent them. So if it was a tabletop constellation, I use these little horse toys. So it could be like this horse would represent them. And then the problem, right? And making it really simple. This is an example. The problem could be this dragon. Okay, and then I ask them to place them on a surface. That's why we call it tabletop, because it needs to be a flat surface that is clear of any clutter. I recommend putting down a piece of cloth so that you can see clearly what's being placed, right? So we have the person and the problem. So once representatives are placed on the surface, you can gain a lot of information from just that. So what we're doing is we're externalizing what's going on, right? So when we come into acceptance of that, acceptance of what is, then we can change things, right? But first of all, we have to accept that we have a problem, and the relationship to that. So in a tabletop constellation, you're looking at, where is this looking? Where is it looking? Is it looking at the problem? Is the problem looking at you? Okay. Is it head on? Is it far apart? Are you looking at something else beyond the problem or away from the problem? So already you can see that there's a lot of information. We're also looking at what is being chosen. So, you know, I just use this as an example, that this is a big red horse. And in my kit, I call it a kit, which I have of like other horses, mythical baby horses, you know, work horses. I have a collection of different breeds, different movements, things like that. So all of that tells you something, right? So this red one is very big in comparison to the others, you know, like this one's smaller, right? And it's loud, like red is kind of loud, big, right? And then I threw this in my kit, like, because I really liked it. It's not a horse, but it's a mythical creature, it's a dragon, okay? I liked it, and it's white, and it's ferocious, and its mouth's open, and its claws out this, right? So what happens is they start coming to life, and then you start having a relationship to that. A resonance happens, okay? When you can relate to what you're seeing, what you picked, where you placed it, how far away it is, what the size is in relationship to the others that are being represented. Obviously, if something's bigger, then it's big in your life, right? If it's small, then it's small in your life. Like if you pick yourself to be something like this, which is one of the very tiny horses, in relationship to, the problem, then the problem's massive and overwhelming, and it's probably going to eat you up, right? So just seeing that and being in resonance with that, you start feeling it in the body, right? So this is a somatic process, meaning information comes through the body, what sensations, feelings, and that's all information. It's all relevant. And then what's happening is energy starts to move. Okay? So personally, I believe that there's a solution to every problem. And in a tabletop constellation, in this example where I set up you and the problem, we might bring in a resource. Okay? So I'm going to pick this one as a resource. I don't have to know what the resource is. I just do it by feel, like what feels right. It's not a mental thinking, analytical process. It's just like what feels right. So this being my resource. And in my kit, this is a draft horse, it's a work horse. It's a draft horse, but it's also, I feel it's pretty masculine. And, maybe that could be someone's father or grandfather, and that could be their resource. Okay. So when that one's placed, then we can also bring in the solution. All right. So the solution might be this one. All right. So again, we don't need to know what the solution is. We just place it on the surface, on the tabletop. And then we start seeing the relationship to all of those 4 representatives. Then we can move things, right? So we can move ourselves. We can move the problem, which might even become another resource. All right. But where the cathartic process is in the tabletop constellation is really when you start moving the representatives, because you really are moving energy, moving your relationship to, the problem, the solution, the resource. So that's just an example of a tabletop constellation. So I call that one problem solution. And last night I was watching Raising by Wolves. It's a HBO show, transhumanism show, Ridley Scott. It's pretty crazy. Anyway, there's a scene where the android, who's called Father, does a tabletop constellation, except it's in the sand. Okay, so he has a problem. He makes these little dolls out of twigs and pebbles and that represent his children. And then he has one to represent his partner, who's an android, mother. And he finds a solution to his problem by doing that. So he's externalizing the situation, looking at it, getting reflection and feedback, and then coming up with a solution, right? So it's brilliant. And you'll start seeing it, like I saw it in that. And it has shamanistic connections, definitely. Like in shamanism, like the shaman might take the person who has a problem out into nature, and then they'll say, you know, the mountain's your father, the tree is your mother, or something like that. But it's like basically finding things, objects, to represent what's going on, basically. So you can also do tabletop constellations for yourself, like I just said that in that HBO series, Father did it for himself. I've done them for myself. I've had huge revelations. I wrote a book called Exploring Boundaries, Freedom Through Autonomy, and I wrote an example of a tabletop constellation that I did for myself, which really changed the trajectory of my life. And it was really simple. I was in a really difficult situation. I felt completely overwhelmed. I was on the verge, I think, of a breakdown. And I just sat down and I got all the horses, the little horses, and I laid it out. And what I was looking at, I was like, okay, you know, I know that. Like, I know that's what's happening. So basically, I made a triangle. So this is also what you look at in constellations, the shape. What is the shape? It was a triangle, and I was at the pinnacle of the triangle. Okay, so everything was behind me, and you know, that's how I felt. Like I was carrying everything behind me. You know, my business, my partner, extensions of partner, so on and so on. And I was having trouble where in my life where I felt really, really stuck. And things were not going well. I was having crazy accidents. I drove down the road and my wind mirror, whatever you call it, the mirror, hit a trash can and it just exploded in my face like a glass. I wasn't hurt, but I mean, it was pretty shocking. And then my dog attacked my little dog, like almost, you know, killed him. I mean, things like that were happening. And like, so when things like that happen to me, I know I have to do something. Something has to shift. Something has to change. So like I said, I sat down, put the horses, I laid it all out. I saw it. I was like, yeah. And I got up, and it wasn't until I think like later that night or the next day, it like came like boom, you know, hit me, right? I was exhausted and overwhelmed because I was carrying everyone. Like no one was by my side. Like no one was sharing, you know, what was going on in my life, right? And so that sort of epiphany made me make certain decisions, a choice. And from that, like, things changed, things opened up. And, you know, I didn't have those crazy accidents anymore. Yeah. And I'm saying it's not easy sometimes, right? To make huge decisions. Like, I'm going to move, or I'm going to end my relationship, or I'm going to change my career, or, you know, sometimes it's not easy to make those decisions, but things can be holding you back. Like I felt like I was being held back, and I was taking on too much responsibility that really wasn't mine, you know, and it was getting in the way of what I needed to do, right? So that came out of just a very simple constellation, which I did by myself, which I said, and had a huge impact. And, you know, like I tell my students, like, sometimes you might not get it immediately, like you might not see it, But for someone else, if you're working in a partnership, in the sense of like you're doing a tabletop constellation and then you have someone reflecting, that can be helpful because you might not be seeing it, right? So you might need a little help with reflection. So that's what happens if I'm doing a constellation for someone, a tabletop one. I'm not moving the things. I'm not choosing the, pieces. They are. And in that process, the person can be fully accountable, right? Fully accountable of what's happening in the constellation. So this works really well, I found, like for men, like not all men, but some men that I work with are very skeptical when it comes to like me maybe telling them what I'm getting in the role, because they might not believe it, or they might think that I'm manipulating in some way, or I'm crazy or something, right? So when I sit down with someone like that, it could be a woman too, right? In my experience, it's usually been men, but sit down with them and then have them choose the horse, choose the pieces, place them, and then I just reflect, oh, I noticed that you put your girlfriend in the center, right? So what does that mean in a tabletop constellation? That means that they are the center of your world right there, right? The center of your life. They pretty much are running things, especially if it's a big horse and bigger than you, right? That means that they have more power, or you've given them more power, elevated them in some kind of way, and you're in the shadows, right? And so when I might point something like that out, like I get this massive response from the person, like, whoa, like, whoa, or something like, I'm just giving an example, but it's happened like that. I mean, I've had a man like get up from the chair and just like pacing around and like having all these like, emotions going like crazy because he's seeing things that he didn't see before, that he wasn't aware of or conscious of. Okay, so all that takes is reflection, just saying what is on the board. All the information is there, all the information. All right, so you do this neutrally. I do it neutrally. That means I'm not invested in the outcome. I'm not trying to manipulate. I'm not trying to create a happy ending or, the kind of scenario that would maybe please the client. Not interested in doing that. That doesn't work, right? All I'm doing is reflecting on what is on the board. And I found that once people have realizations like that, like in that example, this man had a huge realization, it sticks. It's like they remember that constellation. I have people tell me like, do you remember that tabletop constellation you did for me like 6 years ago or like 5 years ago? And I'm like, no, I don't remember it, because I do a lot of work, right? I can't remember everything. I do remember some that really stand out, and then they'll say, yeah, I remember when, yada, 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 whatever. And it really stuck with him. Like I said, like I remember that one that I did for myself that really changed the course of my life. Right? So they're powerful, like really powerful, really simple, easy to do. So I did a boundary class, and I had a couple of tabletop constellations in that where I had people do them, and then coming up in June, I'm teaching a tabletop constellation primarily for English speaking people, where it's basically how to do a constellation around your business, how to do a tabletop constellation around relationships, how to do a constellation around problem solution, simple things. There is one about family. So when we get into the family constellation, it gets a little bit more complicated, okay? Because then we go more into the traditional Hellinger work, family constellation work, systemic constellations. But there's still ways that you can do very simple constellations, tabletop constellations, to see your relationship with family members, basically just by picking, horses, like this. Like a lot of times I have clients who choose themselves as, the mythological horse, the one with wings, the magical horse, and then their parents are regular horses, right? So they see themselves as either, more spiritual or more enlightened or whatever, and that's not a put down or anything. It's just, they see themselves as different, right? So in itself, there could be a denial of the parents, like, they're not my parents, they're not spiritual like me, or they're not my parents because they don't believe in souls, Well, so in that is a denial of the parents, right? So constellations is all about inclusion. Inclusion. Whenever there's a denial of anyone, especially the parents, especially, mom or dad, for whatever reason, like I said, they don't believe in souls, or, then you are going against what is true. All right, so you're in denial of the truth. And when you're in denial of the truth, you're not getting resourced from your ancestral line, right? So Hellinger talks about the love coming down. He talks about the order of love, right? That your parent came before you, your grandparents came before you. So the point being, I don't want to get too off topic, but the point being is that when we deny a parent or a family member, then we are out of alignment with truth. And then we're kind of amputated from, our resources, right? Like our birthright, our connection to this source of love that goes through us all the way through to our ancestors. And what is that? It's probably infinite, right? I don't know, that's going into another topic, but point being is that you're running really low on battery when you deny a parent, whether you like them or not, whether you love them or not. You are basically being starved, right? And consequently, that might show up in your life as, this one feeling like not acknowledged. People don't see my powers. People don't see how sensitive I am. People don't see me, right? So you want to go through life like that, like an orphan. So in a constellation, very, very simple, right? But hard to do for a lot of people that have justified the reasons why they deny their parents. Okay. Very, very simple. And it would be, I see you, right? That's one of the things we do in constellations, where we offer a healing statement or a truth statement. I see you, mother. I'm your daughter. You're my mother, and that will never change. Okay, so that simple statement can release energy, can bring things into alignment, allow the energy to flow. And, you know, as crazy as it seems, it can happen through these little figurines. It can happen like that. Obviously, there's other ways I work where I work in person, and I do horse constellations, and we have real people, and we have real horses, and we have real eye contact and things like that, right? So that's another way of experiencing it. But if you are, say, like working online or communicating with someone online, doing the tabletop is really helpful. And if you're traveling, you can take, you know, a little bag. I take my kit with me. I went to Japan. I was traveling from Kobe to Tokyo with my friends. And I did 2 tabletop constellations on the train, on the fast train, with a little flip down, you know, on the seats. And it was really powerful. And we were able to do that. So that's another way that, you know, tabletop constellations can be utilized. And I'm just looking at a question. So what if the parent denied their kid? Good question. All right. So what if the parent denied their kid? When you, I'm going to go back to this example. When you go back to this, like, I see you, mother, you know. So if the kid feels denied by the parent because feels unseen or rejected in some way, like maybe the child's adopted, when the acknowledgement comes, right? So I see you. It has an impact on the parent. It has an impact. And also, when we set up a constellation, we can see other things that are happening with the mother, right? That maybe the mother lost a child, a baby, all right? And is looking at that one because the mother's heart is with that baby and doesn't have the love to give to this one. So that's just an example, all right? I'm not saying that's true in every case. I'm just giving you an example. So when the mother has some kind of trauma or some kind of wounding and isn't able to express the love towards the child, right? So when acknowledgement happens, all right, and when the missing one is brought in, all right, so whether that's a miscarriage or abortion or infantile death or some kind of tragedy where there's a death of a child, the mother is usually, you know, if it hasn't been processed, the mother is usually connected to that, right? And so once we bring in the one that's excluded, that allows the mother to see you or the child, right? But I'm getting a little more complex now because that's more about the family constellation work, which I add on to the tabletop constellation course. So I have a tabletop constellation course that's basically like 6 90-minute classes online, and everybody gets to create their kit. So right now I'm teaching a Japanese students, and you know, I encourage them, you know, find things that really resonate with you, that like excite you. Like horses and these kind of things excite me because I really understand horses. I know horses. I live with them. I know, you know, what the expressions of horses are. So like this horse is excited, sniffing the air. It's like ready to move, but it's not moving. You know, that tells me a lot already. One of my students has a kit with tiny little animals like dogs and goldfish and a frog. And we did a constellation, and it was really incredible. And it worked really well with what she picked. So when you collect representatives, right, you create a system all systems work. Right? So the question I'm seeing is from Sylvia. This life will be saved. Not really understanding that, but not really understanding that. I think you're talking about this one. This life will be saved. It's anyone who's not included or is excluded in some kind of way through like a painful exit, right? They died tragically, or like they killed themselves, or something like that. You know, it's very difficult for the family to talk about it. There's maybe a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, and so then this one that exited, you know, in whatever way, is now buried, not seen, right? Because it's clouded in all these emotions, such as, like I said, guilt and shame, right? But when you have this one represented, whether it's someone who committed suicide, right, then all of those feelings, they go away, because what really comes out is love, and that this one existed, right? Because if it's too painful for the family to, you know, think about the kid that committed suicide or something like that, it's too painful. When you bring them in, whether it's through a tiny horse, whether it's through a person, you know, who's being a representative, you are acknowledging them, what is true. They did exist, all right? They are part of the family, all right? Love starts flying. It's crazy. It's palpable. You can feel it. Everybody starts getting goosebumps. Their hairs are going up. People are crying, you know. But in that simple process, incredible healing is achieved. Not just for the mother, not just for you, not just for the mother, not just for you, not just for this one, but the descendants that are going to come next, because we're stopping a pattern, right? So if you, in families, you might recognize that things repeat themselves. Like in a suicide, you could have a grandparent that commits suicide, and then it might skip one generation, and then you have, you know, a child that commits suicide or something. And then you find out that there were others or something like that. But by doing a simple constellation, like in the case that I'm talking about family constellations, you can prevent that from happening anymore. You can heal the family system. All right. Anyway, thank you for the questions. I'm just reading. Okay, so I'm getting questions that saying that you're finding it interesting, but you can't watch right now. I'm gonna let this go to my timeline so that you can watch it later. And I think I'm gonna stop here. I've talked quite a bit. I really just wanted to teach you a little bit about how tabletop constellations work. And tell you about my tabletop constellation course that I'm teaching in June 5th. And then an extension of that will be really going into the family constellation work, so that I'll teach you how to recognize when someone's excluded from the family. How do you navigate that, right? Again, we never want to manipulate. We don't want to coerce. We don't want to force an outcome. We have to gently allow it to happen, and you know, pay attention to the information coming through, which comes through the feelings and the sensations, and that's also known as the field, right? So in constellation work, they call that the knowing field, which is basically an energetic field which has all the information. I was just thinking, earlier about all this talk now that, data is the biggest, most valuable thing right now as far as like your information, like, like as far as what you buy and who you know and your behavior, your politics and all that, right? That's now the, really valuable. So like they do that on Facebook, right? They create a database of you, right? So then I was thinking, well, if we're connected to, I guess, the knowing field or whatever, all the information is there anyway. We have access to all information. We do. You do. We have it. It's just about listening. And it's about intention. And anyway, so I just sort of like want to throw that in as a sense of empowerment, is that to let you know that you are powerful, I am powerful, we're all powerful, everyone is powerful, and we all have access to information. And I always do it in a sacred way. It's for the highest good of all. All right, it's not about one person gaining over another or one person winning over another so another loses. It's not about that at all. It's a win-win. It's always for the best of all, the best outcome for everyone. And not exploiting anyone or being nosy or going into someone's business, right? So that's another thing in this work, is that, we have access to information, but, are we doing it with integrity? Are we doing it with integrity, or are we being nosy? That doesn't work. I never do constellations for that. When someone wants to find out if their husband is cheating on them, or, if their kid is doing something or whatever. No. I always take it to the person. Like, well, how does that make you feel? And let's work with that. Not going to go into someone else's business. All right. So anyway, I want to thank everybody for listening. My website is silverhorseretreat.com, and I have an events page and I have events listed there. I have an event online on May 2nd where I'm doing a couple of constellations, and then there's room for reps. So I already booked the constellations, but if you want to see this work, how it works, you can come in as a rep. I am probably going to do tabletop constellations in that, and then segue from the representative here into a rep that's in the event online. So if you are a representative, you might start going into the role of this one. All right, I know it might sound confusing, but it's not really confusing once you understand it and once you experience it. So I encourage you to explore this work, to find out, if not through me, through someone else. It's beautiful work, it's powerful. It changed my life, and I feel really blessed to be doing this work because it does affect a lot of people. It's not just the client. And we're working with the ancestors. We're working with the ones who cannot be in the physical, who can't have the ability to do what we can do, right? But we have their blessing. They want us to do this. They want us to help release whoever is bound up, right? We call that an entanglement. Who's ever entangled in an ancestor's destiny or fate, right? We can release ourselves from that. They want us to, okay? Anyway, so thank you, everybody. And yeah, thank you. And hope to hear from you in some way or give me feedback. It's the first time I've done a live on Instagram by myself. But I had my little horses to help. Okay. All right. Bye.